The political ground beneath Westminster has just been pulverized by a Supreme Court ruling that changes absolutely everything. Moments ago, the highest justices in the land delivered a verdict so scathing, so historically significant, that it has instantly transformed Keir Starmer's premiership into a smoking ruin. What was sold to the public as a routine judicial review has exploded into the single most dangerous constitutional crisis of the last decade. The Prime Minister is missing in action. His cabinet is in a state of total panic. And Nigel Farage has just declared open political war. This is not a drill. This is the moment the entire establishment feared was coming. And now it is here with a vengeance. The ruling didn't just question the government's competence, it struck at the very legitimacy of their power. The streets are already filling up. The internet is melting down under the weight of the outrage. Millions of voters are realizing they have been played for fools. What did the judges find? Why is Nigel Farage calling this the final nail in the coffin of the current order? And can the government actually survive the next 24 hours? Do not look away, because the history of this nation is being rewritten in real time.
The atmosphere inside the Supreme Court was suffocating before the first word was even spoken. Seasoned political correspondents described a tension that felt more like a criminal sentencing than a constitutional hearing. When the judgment was read, the silence in the room was shattered by the sheer weight of the condemnation. The court ruled that the Starmer administration had deliberately bypassed parliamentary sovereignty to enact binding agreements that the British people never voted for. This wasn't an accidental oversight. This was, according to the legal text, a calculated maneuver to subvert the democratic process. The verdict hit Downing Street like a freight train. Within seconds of the announcement, the narrative that the government was restoring order collapsed into dust. The devastating clarity of the ruling left no room for spin. It stated that the executive branch had acted ultra vires, beyond its powers, in a way that fundamentally disenfranchised the electorate.
But then came the reaction that turned a legal defeat into a full-blown political emergency. Nigel Farage, who had been warning about this exact scenario for months, wasted no time in launching a blistering counteroffensive. He didn't just critique the ruling, he weaponized it. Speaking to a chaotic scrum of reporters outside the court, he framed the verdict not as a mistake, but as a crime against the voter. His words were incendiary, designed to ignite the simmering anger of a population already tired of being ignored. He accused the Prime Minister of running a shadow government that operated without the consent of the governed. This wasn't standard opposition rhetoric. This was a direct challenge to the Prime Minister's right to lead. And here is what makes it worse for number 10. The public is listening. The clip of Farage's indictment amassed millions of views within the first hour, spreading across platforms with the speed of a digital virus. The government's attempt to bury the story under technical jargon failed instantly. The people understood exactly what had happened. They understood that the rules applied to them, but apparently not to their leaders.
The sheer scale of the deception outlined in the court documents is breathtaking. We are talking about secret protocols, hidden clauses, and a level of opacity that would make a dictatorship blush. The evidence suggests that while ministers were standing at the dispatch box promising transparency, their aides were drafting loopholes to bypass scrutiny entirely. They knew what they were doing was politically toxic. They knew the public would never accept it, so they decided to do it in the dark. The Supreme Court has now turned on the lights, and what we are seeing is ugly. It is a portrait of an administration that views democracy as an obstacle to be navigated, rather than a principle to be upheld. The betrayal here is personal for millions of people. It confirms the darkest suspicions of the electorate, that the people in charge despise the people they govern. Now, the question is no longer about legalities. It is about survival. The Prime Minister is holed up in Downing Street, reportedly shouting at advisors who have no answers. The strategy of wait and see is dead. The strategy of blame the previous government is dead. This is their mess, their scandal, and their crisis. The establishment media, usually so quick to defend the status quo, is reeling. They cannot spin a Supreme Court ruling that accuses the government of breaking the law.
The shield of respectability has been shattered, and standing amidst the wreckage is Nigel Farage, pointing at the rubble and asking the question that everyone is thinking. How much longer can this go on? Stay right there, because the fallout from this is just beginning, and the consequences will be severe. The explosion of public fury we are witnessing is unlike anything seen in recent political history. It is not just the usual suspects protesting. It is a cross-section of British society that has suddenly snapped. From the industrial heartlands to the coastal towns, the realization that the government has been operating a dual system, one for public consumption, one for private execution, has severed the final thread of trust. Social media timelines are a blur of rage. Hashtags calling for immediate resignation are trending globally, not just locally. This is a digital riot, a mass rejection of the narrative control that Westminster relies on. The footage coming in from across the country shows spontaneous gatherings, people carrying makeshift signs demanding the one thing the establishment is terrified to give them: a voice.
And that is where Nigel Farage has outmaneuvered the entire political class. While Labour MPs are hiding in their offices and Conservative backbenchers are issuing tepid statements, Farage is broadcasting directly to the nation's phone screens. He is framing this as the ultimate battle between the political elite and the ordinary citizen. He is validating the anger that the mainstream media tries to dismiss. He is telling the people that they are right to be furious, that their instincts were correct, and that they have been lied to on an industrial scale. This alignment between a populist figurehead and a Supreme Court ruling is a nightmare scenario for Keir Starmer. Usually, the government can dismiss populist anger as misinformation, but they cannot dismiss the Supreme Court. They cannot dismiss a legal judgment that says in black and white that they broke the rules. The details emerging from the leaked internal communications are adding fuel to the fire. We are learning about emails where senior officials openly mocked the idea of public consultation. We are seeing memos that describe voters as obstacles to progress. This creates an emotional volatility that is impossible to contain. It turns a political error into a moral outrage. People aren't just disagreeing with a policy, they are feeling a deep, visceral sense of disrespect. The system is meant to protect them, but it has been weaponized against them. The sense of betrayal is total. It cuts across party lines. Remainers who care about the rule of law are just as horrified as Leavers who care about sovereignty. The government has managed to unite the entire country in disgust. But then, look at the government's response. It has been pathetic. A curt press release, a refusal to answer questions, a visibly shaken spokesperson reading from a script that nobody believes. This silence is not projecting strength, it is screaming guilt. Every hour the Prime Minister refuses to address the nation is an hour where Nigel Farage controls the narrative. Farage is filling the vacuum with a story of corruption and collapse, and because the government has nothing to say, that story is becoming the truth. The optics are disastrous. On one side, you have the silence of the establishment. On the other, you have the roar of the crowd. The danger for Starmer is that this moves beyond a scandal and becomes a movement. If these protests grow, if this online anger translates into real-world mobilization, the police will lose control of the situation. We are already seeing reports of civil disobedience. We are seeing calls for tax strikes. We are seeing the social contract, the invisible agreement that keeps society functioning, fraying before our eyes. The government has broken its side of the deal. Why should the people keep theirs? This is the question hanging over every cabinet meeting right now. They know they have lost the moral authority to command. They are in office, but they are no longer in power. The power has shifted to the streets, and the man holding the megaphone is their worst enemy.
Inside the corridors of power, the smell of fear is undeniable. Constitutional experts are being dragged onto television sets, their faces pale, struggling to articulate just how unprecedented the situation is. We are in uncharted waters. The British Constitution relies on convention, on gentlemen's agreements, on the idea that those in power will do the decent thing. But what happens when they don't? What happens when the Prime Minister is declared to have acted unlawfully but refuses to leave? We are facing a constitutional standoff that could freeze the machinery of the state. Civil servants are terrified. They are leaking like a sieve because they do not want to go down with the ship.
They are protecting their own pensions and reputations, leaving the politicians to rot. And here is the twist that makes this terminal. The Labour Party itself is beginning to crack. Backbenchers who won their seats by razor-thin margins are looking at their inboxes, filled with venomous emails from constituents, and they are doing the math. They know that if they stick with Starmer, they lose their jobs. The whispers of a leadership challenge are no longer whispers. They are conversations happening in the tea rooms and the corridors. They are seeing the polling numbers, which have fallen off a cliff since the verdict dropped. They are seeing the Reform UK numbers surging as Farage capitalizes on the chaos. Self-preservation is kicking in. The loyalty that Starmer commanded yesterday has evaporated today.
The legal ramifications are just as terrifying. If the government's actions were unlawful, then every decision made under those actions is potentially void. We are talking about billions of pounds in contracts, thousands of regulations, countless international agreements, all of it potentially illegal. The lawsuits are already being drafted. Class action lawyers are circling. The cost to the taxpayer could be astronomical. This isn't just a political crisis. It is a financial ticking time bomb. And who will pay for it? You will. The ordinary taxpayer will be asked to foot the bill for the government's arrogance. But notice how the establishment tries to circle the wagons. You have former prime ministers calling for calm. You have institutional voices urging respect for the process. They are terrified that if Starmer falls like this, the whole house of cards comes down. They are trying to normalize the abnormal. They are trying to tell you that this is just part of the rough and tumble of politics. Do not believe them. This is a systemic failure of the highest order. It proves that the checks and balances designed to stop this kind of abuse have failed. The only thing that stopped it was a last-ditch appeal to the Supreme Court. If that hadn't happened, they would have gotten away with it. That is the terrifying reality. We were one court judgment away from a silent coup.
Nigel Farage knows this. He is hammering this point home in every interview. He is asking, what else are they hiding? And it is a valid question. If they lied about this, what about the economy? What about the borders? What about the health service? The veil of trust has been torn, and you cannot stitch it back together. The credibility of the entire political class is on trial. They are looking for a way out, a scapegoat, a distraction. But the gravity of the Supreme Court's language allows for no escape. This is branded on their record forever. They are the lawbreakers. They are the Constitution wreckers. And the sharks are swimming closer. We are now staring down the barrel of a week that will determine the future of the United Kingdom. The pressure on Keir Starmer to resign is becoming irresistible. It is not just coming from the opposition. It is coming from the editorials of major newspapers, from the unions, and from the very people who put him in power. The logic is brutal. A prime minister who breaks the law cannot enforce the law. If he stays, he is a lame duck, paralyzed by his own illegitimacy. If he goes, he plunges his party into a civil war that could keep them out of power for a generation. There are no good options left. There is only damage limitation.
But Nigel Farage isn't interested in damage limitation. He is interested in demolition. He is calling for an immediate general election. He is arguing that the government has voided its mandate. And millions of people agree with him. The argument is simple. You lied to get in, you broke the law to stay in, so now you must face the voters. The terrifying prospect for the Labour Party is that they might actually lose. The volatility of the electorate is at an all-time high. The old loyalties are dead. People are angry, and they want to punish the people responsible for this mess. And let's be clear about what is at stake here. This is about whether Britain is a democracy or a managed technocracy. It is about whether your vote actually changes anything, or whether the real decisions are made in secret rooms by people you never heard of. The Supreme Court has pulled back the curtain and shown us the ugly truth. The system is rigged. The game is fixed. And now that we know, we can never unknow it. The genie is out of the bottle. The anger you are feeling is the fuel that will drive the next phase of this crisis.
The next 24 hours are critical. We are waiting for the Prime Minister's statement. We are waiting to see if the cabinet holds or folds. We are waiting to see if the police can contain the protests. But most of all, we are waiting to see if the British people will accept this betrayal or if they will demand a total reset. The signals coming from the ground suggest the latter. This feels like the end of an era. The pillars of authority are shaking. The establishment is trembling. So I have to ask you, do you trust them to fix this? Do you believe a word they say anymore? Or do you think it is time for the entire house to be cleared out? The Supreme Court has done its job. Now it is up to the people to do theirs. The storm has made landfall. The wreckage is piling up. And the only thing we know for sure is that nothing will ever be the same again. Watch this space, because the next revelation could be the one that brings the whole thing down. Are you ready for what comes next? Because I don't think they are.